Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Cryptodamus Astrology channel, where we try to explore the astrological events and alignments that are going on and gain a deeper understanding. We've got some big events this week that I want to talk about. We do have a full moon tomorrow morning, tomorrow morning. It's a full moon in Virgo, which is going to emphasize the practical matters and precision, competence, precision work. Virgo is a sign of precision. And this very much, you have the sun in Pisces versus the moon in Virgo. It's going to be about finding a balance between the practical and the spiritual. And we're going to see that theme coming up again as Saturn enters Pisces tomorrow. This is one of the big events astrologically of 2023. And it's a major energy shift from the past 2.5 years of Saturn in Aquarius. So first of all, I'm just going to throw up a little image of Saturn here that we can contemplate as we talk about this big energy shift. Saturn, of course, is the farthest out of the visible planets to the naked eye, and it traditionally represents the boundaries of the known solar system, as well as the movement of time. Saturn being of the original traditional planets, Saturn being the slowest moving, and traditionally considered to be the keeper of time, Chronos. So Saturn changing signs is the end of one era and the beginning of a new era. Just to recap, the last 5 years, Saturn has been in its own signs of Capricorn and Aquarius, especially in 2020, where we had the massive Saturn-Pluto conjunction at 22 degrees Capricorn, and we saw the beginning of the pandemic. And we saw Saturn's effects really heightened with enormous amounts of fear spreading around the world during the pandemic, during that first couple of months of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then Saturn moving into Aquarius in December 2020 as well. Another Saturn-ruled sign. So Saturn has had dignity in its own home signs. And Saturn, both Capricorn and especially Aquarius, are signs that are a bit aloof socially. And it's interesting, that the air sign, Saturn's movement into the air sign of Aquarius, the past 2.5 years, we've mostly been dealing with this airborne virus of COVID-19. And we've had to follow these very strict Saturnian rules of conduct with social distancing, by the way, which is very Saturnian and also very Aquarian. And also the strict Saturn rules of mask mandates, social distancing, and vaccine mandates in many parts of the world. So I think that this era of Saturn, the strict Saturnian rules of Saturn in Aquarius, is ending. And I think we're seeing, hopefully the ending of this kind of whole pandemic era period. And Saturn moving into this new sign of Pisces tomorrow is going to bring this big energy shift. So first of all, let's just kind of settle in a little bit here and talk about what is the symbolism of Saturn. As many of you probably know, it's known as the greater malefic. Sometimes it gets a bad rap because it does bring heavy, serious circumstances and global world events. It is associated with challenges, difficulties, and obstacles. It's also known for separation, right? Social distancing, fear, boundaries, strict boundaries. And it's a principle of contraction of energy, contraction of the economy. However, Saturn, in certain situations, Saturn can also be your best friend. It's not always bad. Saturn is a very important ingredient in success through discipline, focus, and consistent hard work. Those are the blessings of Saturn: healthy boundaries, maturity, consistency, discipline, focus, and hard work bring the blessings and the good qualities of Saturn. Now, we can say very much that Saturn moving into Pisces, Saturn and Pisces is one of the most paradoxical, difficult to understand placements in astrology. It's kind of a mind fuck because the archetypes of Saturn and Pisces are extreme opposite and extremely different. It's very hard to understand the meaning of Saturn and Pisces. Pisces is a sign of transcendence of the limited individual ego structure, the limited individual identity. It's the sign of the transcendence of the material world. Okay, these are things. Saturn represents the limited boundaries of our own individual identity. Saturn represents very much the practical matters of the material world. So you can see the paradox is building here. Pisces is a transcendence altogether of the material world. Pisces is really the sign of the divine, of the spiritual, of higher divine, higher consciousness, higher spiritual consciousness, transcendence of the limitations of the ego and the material world to touch the divine. Pisces represents, religion, spirituality, God, enlightenment, whatever your spiritual path is. It probably has some association to the divine transcendence of Pisces. Okay. So Pisces has to do with all things related to higher spiritual consciousness, also sometimes lower consciousness states of addiction and escapism, escape from reality. Pisces can very much be not only transcendence of the self, but in some cases it can be destruction of the self through drug abuse and addiction and escapist tendencies. So it's not Saturn, Pisces can go kind of either way. Pisces, of course, also represents the oceans and the boundarylessness of the oceans. And so we find very much that we're going to be, over the next 3 years, confronted by this kind of Zen koan, this kind of intellectual paradox of Saturn in Pisces. So what is this going to bring? Pisces is very much a sign of expansion, where Saturn is a sign of contraction. Pisces is very much a sign of the divine, the spiritual, and Saturn is very much a planet that's oriented towards the material world and the practical considerations. Saturn is very much about mastering the details, and Pisces is the big picture visionary. Okay, so in some ways we can say that these two, the planet Saturn and Pisces are very much at odds. Okay. On the other hand, we can also say that they could be complementary if we're able to find the right balance. So I think one of the main, topics that we're going to see over the next 3 years has to do with boundaries and borders, right? So issues having to do with immigration, migrants, refugees, how open or closed should we keep our borders here in the US, but internationally, I think it's going to continue to be a very difficult problem, a very difficult issue. Saturn in Pisces may ask us to tighten our boundaries where they're too loose. However, Pisces may ask Saturn to relax his rules where they're too strict. So I think we're going to have to look at finding a balance. Where we're too rigid, where we're too stiff, we may have to loosen up. But where we're too open, we may have to close down and protect ourselves and be a little bit more practical about things. Something that Stephen Forrest talked about in his recent blog post on his website, the great astrologer, really one of the true masters of astrology of our time. He's talking about the call, Saturn in Pisces, as being a call to do our spiritual work, because Saturn is very much associated with hard work. And so Saturn in Pisces could be a really great call to up our spiritual practice, to focus on the discipline of spiritual mastery, the hard work of doing meditation, of chanting our mantras, of mastering difficult technical spiritual techniques. Okay, and that over this period of this 3 years, we have an opportunity for spiritual growth and maturity, and really a higher level of spiritual mastery if we're able to be disciplined and focused with our spiritual practices. So I've encourage you to go and check out Stephen Forrest's website, where he has a great article about this. Saturn in Pisces may destroy some of our fantasies that we may have been holding out on achieving, whether that was getting rich through cryptocurrencies or just many, many different fantasies that we've had. We may have to come back down to reality and face just our own limitations of what really is going to be our karmic and energetic unfolding. However, I think there's also this potential here of, if we can kind of line up the hard work, the discipline, the focus, the mastery of details of Saturn, together with the big picture, the visionary qualities of Pisces, the intuitive creativity, the divine inspiration of Pisces. If we can line that up together with the hard work and the discipline of Saturn, then we may actually be able to make our dreams come true. So that's, I think, the promise, of Saturn and Pisces is lining up, finding where Saturn and Pisces are complementary rather than at odds. And that we have 3 years to figure that out, right? How do we reconcile the stark differences of Saturn and Pisces? And how do we find where they're complementary and find the balance between the practical and our material world versus the big picture vision and our spiritual life, right? How do we find, where do we find the balance between having our boundaries too open, with Pisces, and having them too closed with Saturn? Where do we find the balance between the practical and the material, the practical limitations that we have to face versus our bigger picture vision and dreams of our life? If we can bring those into balance again, I think we can bring our dreams to fruition. Saturn and Pisces could make our dreams, come true. Of course, a lot of this will depend on where Saturn is placed in our own individual charts by house and what aspects it's making in our own individual charts. So on the positive note, something that's very interesting that I want to also talk about is I'm going to go to my Luna astrology, which many of you guys know by now. I use the online software. You too can use this with lunaastrology.com and use the code CryptoDamus for a discount on Luna astrology software. So I have this set for Tuesday, tomorrow, March 7th, Tuesday around 4:57 a.m. I'm going to just toggle that an hour later, and you can see Saturn here. I'll toggle it back. Saturn at 29:59 Aquarius right here. Okay, if we move that forward an hour, it's going to change into Pisces tomorrow, early tomorrow morning. So, and that initially upon the ingress, it's not making any particularly key aspects. But as we go a few months later, Saturn is going to make a very excellent aspect to Jupiter here. And I have to go into May. So when the planet Jupiter makes its Taurus ingress in the middle of May, and that's over here, May and June, right here on June 7th, Jupiter's going to be at 4 degrees Taurus. And it's going to start to make that a sextile. We can even go back a few weeks, to basically as soon as Jupiter really goes into Taurus, it's going to start to make that sextile to Saturn. And that's going to go exact in the middle of June at 7 degrees. Jupiter's going to be at 7 degrees Taurus, and it's going to make a lovely sextile. Jupiter, being the ruler of Pisces, is going to make a lovely sextile to Saturn in Pisces. And that's a really favorable aspect. And that's something to look forward to, because that is really that perfect balance between the big picture vision of Pisces and the big picture idealism of Jupiter, coming into that perfect harmony with the practical matters, the details, the hard work, the focus, and the discipline of Saturn. So that bodes well, especially for late May and most of the entire month of June. This aspect will remain in effect to some degree throughout the year. Although Jupiter will go all the way up to 15 Taurus, so it will pull away quite a bit from Saturn, but then it's going to start to retrograde back. And then they will come back into that nice sextile again, particularly towards the end of the year. So I'm going kind of quick here towards December, where you've got Jupiter retrograding back. to about 5 degrees of Taurus, and Saturn is going to be moving forward again. And they're especially towards in January, you're going to see them come back into that sextile alignment again. It's not going to be exact again, but it will be quite close to around 1 degree. So this aspect is going to be in effect for quite some time, but in particular, the most powerful of this Jupiter sextile to Saturn in Pisces is going to be in June of 2023. For markets, it's hard to say exactly. This is kind of a wait and see. There's a lot going on with the macro and the economy. It is going to make a conjunction to the Bitcoin natal Venus for about the first 10 days at 0 degrees Pisces. And so historically, when Saturn makes a conjunction to a Bitcoin natal planet, that tends to be kind of unfavorable, at least for that initial conjunction. So we are looking to see if maybe Bitcoin's going to have a sell-off. You can see here tomorrow, Saturn is going to start that conjunction to the Bitcoin natal Venus at 0 Pisces. This is something I've been writing about on my Patreon group, and that's going to hit exact on March 9th. So that's kind of an unfavorable signal for Bitcoin to maybe have a deeper sell-off. Let's see how it plays out. For the larger economy, it's definitely going to bring a shift. Saturn is also going to be co-present with Neptune, but it's not going to make a conjunction to Neptune for several years. So we'll see. Saturn is going to place limits on the limitless. And so hopefully that could be good for the Fed's job of trying to bring inflation down. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, the way to think about this, I think, is really about finding that balance between the practical and the ideals, between the material world, the concerns of the material world, which we can't throw away, but we also know are completely empty and illusory. And finding that balance between the material world, the illusion of the material world, and our spiritual practices and our desire to know something that transcends the material world, that transcends the limitations of our own individual ego identity structure, and touch the divine, come to know God, or if you're a Buddhist like myself, finding that greater path towards realizing our true nature, which is really enlightened Buddha nature. So I hope that this helps to explain some of the paradoxical qualities of Saturn and Pisces. Like I said, it's really difficult to understand it intellectually. And we just have to kind of sit back and relax and let this play out as well over the next 3 years. And there's going to be, I would also check, like I said, check Stephen Forrest, check people, check some other, great astrologers out there like Lynn Bell and Stephen Forrest, and some of the astrologers that I've interviewed here on my show, like S.J. Anderson and Gemini Brett, Nick Dagan Best, and some of the masters of astrology like Rick Levine, and as I said, Stephen Forrest and Rob Hand, and people like those. So let's all look forward to this, hopefully the ending of the pandemic era restrictions and social distancing, and look forward to this new era of Saturn and Pisces. Thanks for joining us today, guys. I hope this has been a helpful video. Please like and share, and check out my website. Excuse me. If you like this kind of information, check out my website, www.astrocryptoreport.com. Check me out on Twitter at AstroCryptoGuru. And you can also join my Patreon group at CryptoDamus1. I'll put some of the links for that in my page, in the description for this video. And I'll be doing a video update soon on the next ingress this month of Pluto into Aquarius, which is going to be potentially an even bigger shift of energy, even more important, even one of the most important astrological events of the year. So we'll see you soon, and good luck with our study and understanding of Saturn moving into Pisces.